Welcome to the Imperfect Dads podcast.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Devin.
We believe dads care deeply about their family and kids,
but they don't always have a space to discuss what their life looks like.
Our podcast is a space for dads to discuss the ups and downs of fatherhood.
And how they feel like they're holding it all together.
Or how they're not.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. On this episode, we have an author and former LAPD officer, Jeff Wenninger. We talk about his life being an older dad, being a single dad, moving from LA back to Ohio, traveling with his son, his time as an officer including working with schools, how he wrote his new book, differences from when he was a kid to current times, and how writing his book made him feel more connected to his parents. Jeff recently wrote a book called On Thin Ice, where he examines the realities of policing and his suggestions on thoughtful and accountable law enforcement practices. There's not currently a release date for the book, but you can find out more information if you go to either jeffwenninger.com or onthinicebook.com. And also just like one more thing.
Dad, just start the episode.
Oh, my bad. Easiest first question to ask you is, how many kids do you have, ages, all that good stuff?
Well, I have one son.
Yeah.
13. And I started late. I was 45 when I had.
My gosh, how's it feel to be a quote unquote older dad?
It's kind of funny because oftentimes his classmates think I'm his grandfather.
Oh no, I would not have expected that.
Yeah, because I am actually old enough to be the father of many of his classmates' parents. So,
man.
Yeah, it's being older, I would say, comes with more advantages than disadvantages.
Yes.
I'm a much more patient individual than I was when I was a younger man. I have a little more financial wherewithal where I don't have to pinch pennies. I can provide him with some opportunities that he wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. And one of the things that I really try to focus on that I think is important is that children get outside of their bubble, that they travel and they see how people live in other places in the world. So like in November, we were over in London, England. We went to Paris in France. He's a huge history buff. You want to know anything about World War I or World War II, he can tell you about it. And so we went to, I rented a car in Paris and I drove over to the beaches of Normandy.
That's cool.
We went and saw all of that and he was just over the moon. And really what was actually on Thanksgiving Day past year, we went to the American Soldiers Cemetery.
Yeah.
I thought, what better thing to do on Thanksgiving than to give thanks to those who were willing to make that ultimate sacrifice, to put into perspective what we need to be thankful for as American citizens. So it was quite a moving experience, not only for me, but more importantly, my son. So that was awesome. But, if I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have that trip, So, it's really interesting. And he gets to see how people live in other places. And one thing that he really keyed in on is like, wow, these houses are so small here in London, Dad. These cars are small. I go, yeah, people don't drive around in SUVs like they do in the United States. They don't live in these homes that are, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 square feet. They live with what they need. And it's a different mindset. So being an older father is cool.
Yeah, that is. Do you, we always try to do this if we're in a new city. We always try to do public transit with the kids because that's such a unique way to see like a city and see who lives in it. When you're in London and Paris, did you do any public transit, or since you rented a car, did you just do your rental car?
No, we used public transit. When we were in London, we would take the subway everywhere.
Yeah.
And we actually took the train from London to Paris.
Yes. Does that go underwater?
Yes.
Like that's so cool. That's so cool.
My son loves trains. I mean,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Trains.
Yes.
So he really enjoyed it. It's a very comfortable ride. It's, it's definitely worth doing. It's a nice way to travel. So then we did walking when we were in Paris, all over the place. I wanted them to see different historic things. And then I rented the car, which was really cool because he got to see on our own time the countryside out there.
Yeah.
actually know what it's like to live in a completely different environment than what we live in.
Yeah.
It was exciting. But even when he was a younger boy, when we still lived in Los Angeles, or I worked in Los Angeles, I was living in Pasadena at the time. I would take the public transportation down to Union Station, Los Angeles, and then we would take the subway into Hollywood, and we'd go to dinner,
That's cool.
and then we'd go home. So he got to experience it, when he was 4, 5, 6 years old.
That's awesome. I have 3 kids. I have a 9-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old son. And I'm in Denver suburbs. And whenever he turned 3, we just took him on the light rail and did like the 40-minute ride down to Union Station, got him a treat down there, and then did it back. And he was just overjoyed. It's so funny that every little boy seems to be obsessed with trains. Like we had 2 older girls. We didn't have trains around the house. We didn't have cars around, but like he just was born loving anything with wheels. And I'm like, how is that so ingrained in a boy? But it definitely is.
Thomas the Train, right?
Thomas the Train
Was on at the house all the time.
Yes. That's right. Where do you live now? I know you just said you used to live like in Pasadena or LA area.
Yeah, I did 33 years in law enforcement.
Yeah.
30 years with the LAPD. And I have sole physical and legal custody of my son.
Okay.
It's just the 2 of us. And I had a job that was rather demanding. I not only put in my regular 40-hour work week, but I was on call 20
Okay.
every day. So I had a live-in nanny. And I would get called out all the time. And I literally got tired of hearing my son say, "Dad," and this is verbatim what he would say, we need more father-son time.
Dude.
When your son is, 5 years old, 6 years old, telling you that,
And he can already know that and say that.
yeah, it's time to reevaluate. Because we'd be at the movie seeing a children's movie, and my work phone would go off, and we'd have to leave through the movie, and it kind of breaks your heart. And you get to a point where you're like, I have, yes, my career aspirations and goals, and have I reached them? No, but I only have one chance to raise my son. And
Yeah.
that's when I made the decision. Well, I was born and raised in Ohio, and I made the conscious decision to move back here to give him an environment similar to that in which I grew up in. I grew up about 40 minutes from where we live now. We're in an eastern suburb of Cleveland. It's a small community, about 4,100 people, and the schools are outstanding. They're top ranked in the state. We got about 12 kids right in the immediate neighborhood, and my son can walk to school or ride his bike to school or walk into town and get ice cream or go grab a burger somewhere. It's just a really unique place. I just felt that, although I lost quite a bit of money financially by retiring earlier than I otherwise had planned, I was in a financial position where I could do that. And it was the absolute best thing I'd have ever.
Yeah. Just moved to Denver suburbs in the neighborhood we moved into. All the kids go to the same school and we all live in the same neighborhood. And it feels drastically different to be able to be like, when the kids are bored, be like, hey, just go knock on this person's door, see if they're home. And you don't realize that that's not like a guarantee that that might be the neighborhood you live in. So I'm sure you're also like, man, this is so nice. Then you actually like feel the sense of community that you live in, and it makes you feel not nearly as alone as it possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, in this community, it's a very close knit group of people, and everybody is looking after everybody else. So, unfortunate for my son, he can't get away with anything because
Yeah.
if any of the neighbors or anybody in town see something that they think I should know about, they'll tell me. But it's a really nice environment to be raised in. He actually, just like I did when I was a boy, he has his own lawn mowing business
Cool.
and a snow shoveling business. So he's lined up, all these neighbors that he does those sorts of services for them. And he opened up a checking account, and he met the local bank, and he walks in, and they don't require him to have the card to swipe that everybody else would normally have. They know who he is, and he can walk in with $100 and say, deposit this into my account. And raising him, uh, I was raised by some very insightful folks. My background's kind of unique. I guess I should probably talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure. Yeah.
My mother was a teenage mother. and
Okay.
she gave me up for adoption. So I was adopted by my parents, who I call my parents. The people that raised me are my parents. And they actually wanted to have 4 children, each a year apart. And they were trying for 12 years. And then that's why they looked into adoption, because they weren't successful. And lo and behold, as life often has it, my mother became pregnant right about the time they were approved for adoption.
Yeah.
So she had my sister, but they were like, it could be another 12 years before I become pregnant again. Let's follow through the adoption. So they adopted me, and then they adopted my brother. He's half Japanese. And then they also fostered my foster sister, who's Black. And we grew up in the 60s and 70s in Kent, Ohio.
Okay.
So my background was rather unique.
Yes.
In regards to how I saw race and, and how I saw how some people treated us or ostracized us from various activities and things like that. But, and it influenced how I saw my law enforcement career, my 33-year law enforcement career. But it was being raised by my parents. My father, like, he was a sociology professor. He was the dean of research in sociology. And my mother, she was a chemist for DuPont before she decided to forego her career because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and believed in the importance of being there for your children. But they were both quite bright. And I remember when I was a boy, we had a chip system. They would take poker chips, which are red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
The white were worth 1 point, the blue were worth 5, and the red were worth 10. And you would do chores around the house and you would earn points. And there was a limit on how many points you could earn in any given day. Because if you wanted to watch a half hour of television, it cost you points.
Yeah.
You argued with a sibling, it cost you points. If you cursed, it cost you points. So if you wanted to make sure you could save enough so you could do what it was you wanted to do, and you knew you couldn't misbehave because you wouldn't be able to meet your goal of being able to do whatever it is you wanted to do. And like I said, there was a limit. You couldn't be bad and then work and do all these chores and then earn everything. There's a limit to what you could earn on any given day. And I remember as a boy, we were watching Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and I was thrown out of the TV room with 30 minutes left in it because I didn't have enough chips. But I did that exact same thing with my son.
Yeah.
And it taught him delayed gratification.
Yep.
And that has transferred into his understanding of money and the value of the dollar and working for it and putting some away for the future and then taking some of it for something you may want now. And he makes judgment calls. He'll look at something and say, how much is it? How much do I really want it? Do I need it? And it's nice to see him on his own make that determination that I think I'm going to hold on to my money.
Yeah.
Versus dad bought it. He would,
yes.
Oh, I'd take it,
Yeah. Well, also, like, now having kids, anything like that my parents set up, I'm like, man, to actually follow through on that. And like, if your kid is in there watching TV, to set a timer or something like that for 30 minutes, then walk in and shut it down. Like, if there's like 3 minutes left in that show, man, I'd be like, you know what? I'll give you some buffer. I'll give you an extra 3 minutes. So it makes you realize that, like, how disciplined your parents actually are, or how disciplined you yourself don't want to be at times.
Yeah. And discipline as a parent is important.
Yes, it is.
And it goes beyond being disciplined, following through with whatever rules that you set. But it's being disciplined in controlling your own fear. Because, I remember when I was a boy, when I was 6 years old, we moved from one side of Kent to the other. So we're about 2 miles. I was 2 miles away from my best friends that lived in my old neighborhood. When I was 6 years old, my parents allowed me to ride my bike over there to visit. And as an adult, after I had my son, my father was still alive. And I'm like, Dad, at 6 years old,
what are you doing?
How is it possible that you allowed me to ride my bike 2 miles? And he said, son, I had fear, but I had to trust that I had showed you how to ride on the sidewalks. When you came to an intersection, you got off your bike, taught you how to cross the street, walking your bike across it. And I couldn't allow my fear to prevent you from having the experiences you needed to develop as a young boy and as a young man. And you have to overcome that. And I had to apply that just this past week.
Yeah.
My son got out of school last week, and he and a buddy of his, they wanted to ride to the next town to go to this bowling alley. And there's actually a bike path that they could take. But I'm like, this makes me uncomfortable.
Yep.
I'm feeling a little anxious about this. my gut's telling me no, my gut's telling me no. And then I ran that conversation through my head that I had with my father. And I said, I'm not going to allow my fear to detract from my son's ability to develop and mature through his experiences. And so I allowed him to do it. But, that's discipline, being
Yeah.
self-aware of what may be impacting the decisions you're going to be making relative to how you raise your children. And you need to make it about your child,
Yes.
not about yourself and your own insecurities and fears that you may have.
Yeah.
Do you have does he have a cell phone or anything? Because like I understand the learning of the trust there, but it'd also be like if something goes wrong, I'd still want my child to have a way to like reach out for help if they do. Has he gotten a cell phone yet?
Yeah, I got him a cell phone. Like I said, he's 13. I got him a cell
Yeah.
phone about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And it's really for me.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell him, there's apps that you can get now, which I have. I can track him.
Yes.
I know how fast he's riding on his bike. I can tell as I'm watching it if he actually stopped at it on
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
his bike across or if he actually rode across. I know where he is all the time. And you can set him up where you have locations. He the gentleman who owns the hardware store in the village we live in, he used to be a high school history teacher. So my son and he have this connection, and they go and they talk about World War II stuff because this
Yeah.
gentleman's father actually was a pilot in World War II.
Cool.
And so, I know, so it activates. My son's at, the hardware store, or
Yeah.
my son's at his favorite burger place, or, he's at school. I know exactly where he is. I know when he gets there. I know when he leaves. So, call it stalking, but I like to know where he is.
I would not be. I mean, that's my daughter or my oldest daughter was like, why can't I have a phone yet? And I'm like, tell me where you're at somewhere where there's either not a parent whose number I have, or it's not school, or we're not with you. And she's like, oh yeah, there's nowhere. And I'm like, yeah, if there's like, I would want you to have a phone because I think you're off on your own somewhere. And if something happens where you need help, the cell phone is the tool to get help. I know she's thinking of it just from the social aspect, and I'm thinking it just from the protection and my anxiety aspect. So I'm still
But
trying.
I police it. I do
Yeah.
police.
Yes.
I see who he's texting, who he's calling. I
Mm-hmm.
monitor what time it is, and he knows I do, and I'll do it right in front of him. I said,
Yep.
"Well, let me see."
Yep.
So I need to know what's going on.
Because it's I feel like before you have kids, you anticipate the ways in which you think you will protect them. And then you have a child and the ways in which you feel like you actually need to protect them. There's always some shift what reality actually looks like.
Right. Absolutely.
Since you were on the police force, do you have how's your anxiety with keeping your son safe? Like, do you know too much about how dark the world can get, or do you still do you more see like the light that exists in the world?
Well, I think I actually have a more realistic viewpoint on what the threat is to children.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, when I was growing up, it was more dangerous than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And by and large, because of the eventuality of all the technology that we have. When I left the house, I didn't have a pager or a cell phone. My parents had no way of knowing where I was. They had to just take my word that I was where I said I was going to be
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And, there's all kinds of things. I'll give you a perfect example. I was with, at my son's school. They have what's called a regatta. So they take these cardboard and they build these boats, and they use duct tape and everything. And then they
Yeah.
have an outdoor pool at the high school that they do this race in them. And I was there, and a good friend of his parents were there, who I'm friends with, and we were talking. And so the seventh graders were doing the regatta. The eighth graders were all going to Cedar Point, which is an amusement.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
And her father, the father of the couple I was talking to, gets a notification on his phone that his daughter, the other daughter who's in eighth grade, had been in an accident, an automobile accident.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he got a call from his daughter, and the school bus that they were riding in had gotten in an accident.
Yeah.
Um, so, that's just a perfect example of how
Yeah.
in real time parents can know what's going on versus what our parents had to go through, where you didn't have that technology. And reality with the DNA investigations and with the DNA enhancing those and all of the the people's abilities to just take photos of things or videos of things with their phones. I mean, it isn't actually a safer time now. And I understand why people feel it's more dangerous, but that's because of what we just talked about, technology, social media. They always say, Mark Twain says, what a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth puts on its shoes. Well, the reality is we can get a hold of information in a snap of our fingers. And that's a reality. So what our parents weren't aware of that was going on, we are now readily aware of.
Yep.
We have a perception that it's a lot worse than it actually may be. And the numbers may be higher, but the population is. I mean, I was born in the mid-'60s. I think the population was like double what it was when I was a kid.
Yes.
It's all relative.
No, that seems to be like a common thought is I think people are starting to realize that we are maybe too worried about our kids in the physical aspect and not worried about them enough in like the digital landscape that exists.
Well, the digital landscape is quite frightening, actually.
Yes, it is.
And everything that they can be exposed to in social media, and it's really tough to keep tabs on that stuff. There's a lot of the bullying goes beyond schoolyard bullying. It's now some of the most damaging bullying occurs electronically, via text and stuff. And you and I, when we were growing up, we could have an embarrassing moment, but people would forget about it. Oftentimes these embarrassing moments get caught in the ether because it's captured on a video or, text messages are there forever. Everything's, it's just, and you never can live it down. So, at the end of the day, it's a tough landscape for the young children and especially young teenagers to navigate it at this point. And really what I'm observing is that, COVID really hurt that are around my son's age because those formidable years of developing relationships and learning how to interact appropriately with your peers were lost, because I think he was in second grade when we had to finish up the school year at home. Then the whole third grade was at home, half of fourth grade was at home, and then the remaining part of fourth grade was in masks.
Yeah.
They lost those real crucial years. It's really, some kids are really struggling to catch up. I'm seeing some things that are just unbelievable in regards to poor behavior and conduct by the kids at schools. I have a strong background in school safety.
Do you? Okay.
My law enforcement background. And, I worked with the LAPD as an officer. I was assigned to Metropolitan Division, and put that in layman's terms. That's kind of like the special forces of the department, the SWAT and the K-9 and all.
Okay.
Back when Columbine occurred,
Yeah.
we sent a contingency of SWAT personnel up there to study it, because at the time the tactics were you contain and control the location and you call SWAT and wait while you have an active shooter that is committing all kinds of egregious acts and death is occurring. And we needed to change our tactics, where what ultimately was created by the SWAT officers was called immediate action rapid deployment tactics. And those are the tactics that even today are still being used. And I used to teach those tactics. And then I actually implemented those tactics as a tactician on a tactical response team to a school shooting, an elementary school shooting at a Jewish school in the San Fernando Valley, about 4 months after Columbine. And then later in my career, when I was a lieutenant, I was the officer in charge of the detective entity that investigates all officer-involved shootings. And we investigated the shooting at LAX, where there's a TSA officer that was shot and killed, and a number of people were shot throughout the terminal. And so I have a real strong understanding of that stuff. Yeah. So when I worked, when we lived in Monrovia at one point in California, and my son's elementary school, I went there and I implemented, it's a nationally recognized program. It's called Watchdogs. Dogs stands for Dads of Great Students.
Okay.
And I was the top dog because I worked with the principal to implement bringing this program to the school.
Yeah.
And basically what it is it's not just dads. It could be moms, it could be uncles, it could be grandparents, grandmothers, aunts, uncles. People, concerned citizens in the community can volunteer for school drop-off, school pickup, in the hallways, at recess, during lunch, all of those sorts of things. Because the studies show that our children perform better academically in school. But more significantly, there's a reduction in the incidence of bullying and So you have lower incidence of children having low self-esteem and those sorts of things and behavioral issues. More importantly, what it does is it creates those student adult relationships, trusted relationships, where the students, if something is occurring, that they will step forward and tell an adult that hopefully with that information, if it's involves violence, can deter it and prevent it from occurring. Because the reality is that 4 out of 5 school shootings, a minimum of one other person knows about the event that's going to occur prior to it occurring. So it's about creating the environment with whoever that person may be or persons will feel comfortable coming forward. And that's what these programs do. And we really have to make our children, as dads and as mothers, that level of priority. Schools are not there for us to just hand our children off and say, they're your problem for the time that you're here, and then you get them back. So you need to be actively involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also got to be I still remember like the officer that I was assigned to my high school. I mostly just tried to stay out of his way and not be noticed by him. So I feel like it's got to also be hard to be that officer in which you're there to protect and be a person, but also be relational with the kids in which you're like a trusted and safe place for them whenever you're also there as a symbol of authority at the same time. It has to be I would think it would take a very unique person to do that well.
Yeah, it does take a unique person. But the one thing I have noticed is, and I have a forthcoming book. It's called On Thin Ice.
Yeah.
And it talks about my personal background, my professional experiences, and my practical insights relative to the actual solutions that I think should be implemented to help law enforcement be successful moving forward in 21st century. And a lot of it deals with, the law enforcement culture where we've seen an increased militarization of law enforcement. And not just in attitude and the equipment that they use, but how they're outfitted. And my son has even commented on that, where he's here in our little village. You have these officers, they have these external ballistic jackets that they wear instead of having the concealable bulletproof vests, where this day and age with technology, they're so thin, you can't even tell they'd have them on. But for some reason, law enforcement has gone to these exterior vests. And I can only assume that it's because they provide you with a lot more storage for everything that they are requiring you to carry now, because they want you to have readily accessible to you something for any eventuality that may be confronted with. But at the same time, there's a price to be paid for that. My son's like, it's intimidating. Seeing the taser and seeing, all of these various force options that are attached to your uniform. He said, Dad, and you were a cop, Dad, and you're my dad, and I still find it intimidating. So even if you possess all those characteristics from a personality standpoint where you're approachable and, a child's going to feel that they can entrust you with information, you've artificially placed an obstacle in front of you with the way you appear. And unfortunately, I don't think law enforcement at times is insightful enough to even realize that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, if I walked up to you and you had a taser, a gun, pair of handcuffs, and pepper spray all in your belt at the same time, how I'm going to speak to you is going to be different because I'm like, I don't think I'm going to say anything to offend you. But if I offend you in any way or appear as a threat to you, I know all the ways you can take me down, and I'm just going to give a head nod now and walk on by just because of you run through the contingencies in your head. I'm not going to do anything dumb, but what if somehow you need to use one of those? And I'm like, I don't. That looks like that would hurt. I'm good. I'm going to stay away.
Yeah. I mean, it's so significantly different than what you're used to. And we're drawn to what we're used to, or what commonalities. We're drawn to people that are common to us. And when you have somebody that's in an elaborate uniform like that, that's something very different.
Yes.
And so I don't
Yeah.
understand why these school resource officers are equipped and outfitted the way they are. I mean, I prefer that they have I believe that, they never know what might happen. You should have a bulletproof vest on, but it should be concealable. And you should have like you know, a, during the months where it's warm enough, just have a little like kind of a golf shirt, a collared golf shirt with an embroidered badge with your name. And, yes, you carry a firearm, but you can have like a soft, gun belt, and
Yeah.
you just have your gun on you, and you're much more wearing khakis and tennis shoes.
Yeah. You can be a little bit more, I don't want to say the word casual, but like not as threatening of a physical appearance and still do your job very well at the same time.
Absolutely. And truth be told, you can be, you could probably even dress just in civilian clothes.
Yeah.
Where the average person wouldn't look at you and go, "That's a school resource officer." It's like perhaps you're better off not being readily identifiable.
Yes.
It's kind of like when I worked in Los Angeles, we'd go to eat. You always want to eat sit at the back of the room with your back to the wall so you can see the entire room. So
Yeah.
if someone could just walk up on you because they can identify you easily as law enforcement. If they want to
Yep.
cause you harm, they can. Well, they don't have that benefit because they can't identify me as that because I'm not dressed like.
Yeah, I was just going to say, tell us about the new book that you wrote. Like, what's it about? How'd you write it? All that good stuff.
Well, you know what motivated me to write it was
Yes.
I did 33 years in law enforcement. And with my background that I explained and the way I was raised by my parents, I was raised to be a critical thinker. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. There's always room for improvement. Always strive to achieve the best you can at everything you take on and doing. Um, and that's kind of the way I always was. Now, I was a hockey player.
Okay.
I played Division I college ice hockey on scholarship. I played in the United States Hockey League, and actually probably would have had a fairly formidable professional career, except for the fact that I had some significant injuries. I mean, at this point, 58, I have 2 total knee replacements. I have a total
Yeah.
shoulder replacement.
Dude.
But the reality is that I took those values that my parents taught me as a young boy and took them into my hockey career, which transcended quite well into my law enforcement career. And during my experiences in law enforcement, I saw all kinds of many ways that I felt the industry of law enforcement and could improve. And after my 33 years, I was kind of frustrated with the little progress that I saw that had occurred. And I found that now that I was no longer in law enforcement, I was actually more empowered to make a difference. And it takes courage to write the type of book I'm writing because I'm willing to have those tough conversations that require you to be honest and admit some deficiencies in regards to how law enforcement can improve. So I talk about my background so people understand who I am.
Yeah.
I share my experiences so they understand what helped formulate my opinions on what needs to be done to make the improvements. And it's just like anything else. I share a part of myself, I expose a part of myself wherein you have to know somebody in order to like them to then trust them. And so I had to share that in my book so people would trust that what I'm saying in regards to the actionable solutions is actually credible and viable. And I think it's going to be a groundbreaking book. Like I said, it's called On Thin Ice, and people can, if you're interested in checking it out, you can go to Jeff Wenninger, and I'll spell my last name. It's WENNINGER.com. Or if you don't want to worry about spelling my name, go to onthinicebook.com and it'll take you to that landing page and you can sign up. It's going to be released in late summer or early fall. The marketing team will determine that. There's a whole strategy behind it.
Yep.
Stuff I know nothing about, but
Yep.
I trust them. But you can go to the landing page and you get put on the email list, and you can actually read the first chapter for free. So
That's awesome. Question about your writing process. Is that whenever you go to write a book, do you make that kind of your 9 to 5 job, or like while your son's at school, you're like, all right, I got to knock out some chapters while he's away? Or how do you work writing into your day-to-day life?
Well, I got to be honest. Yeah, I did quite a bit of writing just in my job, and I'm a strong writer.
Okay.
I had no idea how to write a book.
Yeah. No.
No idea. Didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I had an idea of the framework that I wanted to work within, and I had an outline, and I started with that. And I really, honestly, would do the best writing when would take my walks.
Okay.
So I would take walks, and I would rather than write when I'm walking, I'd carry a recorder, and I would record my thoughts. And then I would go home and I would write just little excerpts and stuff. And I would had a notepad next to the bed. When you wake
Yeah.
up in the morning, you're just kind of laying there thinking about
Yeah.
things come to you. Or if you're wake up in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, things just come to you, and I'd capture it. So then I didn't have any steadfast, concrete way that I did. I just kind of put out. The process took about 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I got my initial manuscript and I had an editor read it, and like, wow. And it was raw at that time. And, there's a lot of stuff I had to remove because I wrote it. A lot of it was therapeutic.
Mhm.
I'm saying whatever I
You
want to.
exercise some demons there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about, you know, certain people and
Yeah. Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
It's because it's there, but you don't do that enough time. But, and I learned about it where like I'm a character in this book. I'd classify this book as it's a prescriptive nonfiction where you have the realities of a circumstance, and this is my prescription on how I think it can be improved. And the reality is that I'm a character in that book, and I had to share more of me than I ever imagined I was even thought I'd be willing to do, actually.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So it wasn't about just talking about what I experienced, but I had to talk about how it made me feel and
Yeah.
how it influenced how I saw things in the future and that sort of a thing, as well as like the impact my parents had on who I became. I dedicate the book in part to my parents because they're both passed. You know, they're characters that I had to develop. I didn't occur to me that they'd want to know, well, okay, you're here in your career, but what's going on with your dad?
Yeah.
You know, like what's so I had to incorporate all of that in. So I had what I had I had three editors, three separate editors
Seriously.
at three
Okay.
different stages read it. And then I had beta readers where I had about 10 people from suburban housewife to attorneys, legislators, and law enforcement professionals,
Yeah.
and everybody gave me honest feedback. And trust me, that required me to make a lot of changes
Yeah.
because I had to change the whole tone. Because a lot of the feedback, and it was pretty universal that I was getting from everybody, was that they felt like I was talking to them,
Yeah.
and they're like, "You're better if you write it in a tone where you're talking with us."
Oh, that's such a slight difference that has to be so difficult at the same time.
Yeah. So where you're like you're presenting your experiences, causing the reader to think. And so I even actually wrote and would ask the reader questions.
Yeah.
And so that's how I completely changed it. It's more of like a populist voice. It reaches everybody, and so people felt that they're part of this solution because they are.
Yeah.
I think for a minute that I know everything, or that any of these suggestions that I have in it of themselves are the solution. I've always said that it's not about being right, it's about getting it right. And that
Yes.
requires that you have as many diverse voices sitting at the table. And most importantly, people that have conflicting opinions and being open to hearing to those opinions. And then and only then will you be able to come up with what is actually the best solution and being right about it. So that's how I tried to write my book. Or people that and the feedback that I've gotten, I've advanced reader's copy, and I'll send you one. They're like, "Wow, this really works. This is really, really nicely done this way." But to 11 it was an effort, a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm even thinking about trying to tell, like, if I were to tell you a story about my parents right now, I would not think of it like, hey, but who's your dad as a character? What are your dad's core characteristics? Are you just telling a story that your dad told you? Or are you actually making people feel your dad's core principles as you read the story? And I'm like, no, I'm just talking about my dad. Cool. How do we make this so you feel your dad's core principles through this story? And I'd be like, with a lot more work than I did on the first draft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't easy.
No.
And to be honest, there'd be times I'd have to walk away from it for 3
Yeah.
weeks, just
Mhm.
forget about it.
Yeah.
And then you'd come back to it. And, or you just go to a whole nother section. And then it just continued to evolve too.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to include this. I want to include this, or something relative occurred. Like we had this year's been unbelievable. January 1st, we had New Orleans, the
Yes. Yes.
terrorist attack there. We had the bombing in just outside the Trump hotel in
Yep.
Bay.
Yep.
January 7th, we had the fires in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's right.
All of these things, I'm like, I need to write about these because there's examples of what I'm talking about and failures of leadership or examples of strong leadership that we need to learn from, and the good stuff emulate in the future, bad stuff make the improvements to make sure we don't do that again.
I think one thing that's really hard to teach and give a level of acceptance for is that like getting it right is usually a journey to get there, and figuring out how to like get it right, whatever that phrase may be, is you just I feel like you take steps to get there, and I think a lot of times my assumption is you get it right on the first try, and that's rarely what I've ever done. I've never really done like I've never cooked a new recipe and it's like this was perfect your first try. It's always like, no man, you're gonna make tweaks, you're gonna do better, and to teach your kids that whenever I feel like because of the social media age we live in now, kids can replay what they did on their first try over and over again. I feel like it's more important to teach like, hey, this was your first attempt. Let's analyze it. Let's make it a little bit better next time. You did good. You did some bad. That's going to be it every single time. Let's step forward with this energy is, I think, crucial, but I don't know if everyone is that willing to accept that like, hey, people are trying their best and we can always be a little bit better.
Right. And the one thing I got to tell you is that, and it was a motivation for doing it, and in the benefit of actually doing it is not self-serving at all. It's the way that it serves my son.
Yeah.
It's the example that I'm setting that life is bigger than you.
Hmm.
You need to find ways to give back and to always think civically. How
Yeah.
can you help other people and improve life for other people? And yes, as a result of writing this book, I've had to take some time away from my son where he would prefer that I do something with him. But I'm like, I'm busy. This is important. But it's an example that I'm setting for him, as my parents did for me. And I didn't realize until I was adult how important those examples that my parents were setting for me
Yeah.
by their civic type minded activities. My mother, she was a president of Legal Women Voters. She ran for city council and won. And she literally went and knocked on every single household in our town.
Yeah.
And we lived in a community of, it was Kent. It was a community of about 26,000 people at the time.
Yeah.
And every night after supper, she'd go out and knock on doors and meet every single person to ask for their vote. And yeah, was she around for me at times when I needed her? No.
Yeah.
It was awesome, the example that she was setting. And that was more powerful than having her around to
Yeah.
help me get the splinter out of my finger. Dad could step up for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you feel like writing, I'm kind of getting a sense that like writing this book made you, it seems like it gave you an outlet to communicate your love and respect for your parents as well.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, it was. And it is it's it is to show that that is the reality, and I in part dedicate the book to my son as well. He's my everyday motivation to be better because it's the right thing to do, but it's the example that I want to set for him. And it's really, I got to tell you, when we look at social media and stuff within the community here, and you look at people posting, they're on vacation here or they're, at this nice restaurant there or whatever. And I'm sitting there going, I'm a volunteer crossing guard for the Indian
Okay.
people here in town. Every Monday through Friday, I cross the kids at the main downtown intersection after school. And we have a really hard time getting the volunteers to do that. And it's what people value is really shifted from at least what my parents instilled in me that we need to value as citizens and in this whole the civic minded thing that I'm sharing. And once again, just like my book, I volunteer for that. I find it rewarding. The kids are very fun to get to know.
Yeah.
And you understand when they've had a rough day. You're there as a sounding board if they need it. You're one of those trusted adults that
Yeah.
they can share something that they may need to get off their chest.
Yeah.
But that being said, it's just like my book. It's the example that I'm setting for my son as well. So, there's a lot of different ways as a father that you can raise your children without actually be raising them. It's through the example,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't even have to be around. They just have to know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Definitely. I think one thing that feels more apparent to me as I get older is how easy the world we live in is to isolate yourself. And I hope always for my kids and everything that I show them the value of not isolating yourself, going through things with people and having people come alongside with you as you do it. Because like, yeah, if you're a kid who had a bad day and you're walking by and the crossing guard gives you smiles like, hey man, you doing okay? You know you're not alone. But it takes people in the community you live in to just look up. And like it makes me sad sometimes to think like, are you looking up? Basically, are you just not looking down or like looking at the ground or at your phone? Can you just make eye contact with the people around you? And you'll learn the stories of your community so well just by looking at people in the face when you walk. So it's funny. I'm 6'4", so I'm pretty tall. And I always expect when I go to the grocery store for someone to help me to ask for help with things on the top shelf. So that's one of those like minor examples I'm trying to show to my kids of like, hey, there was a woman who was about 5'0" who looked older and she made eye contact with me and looked up at the shelf. And I was like, hey, we need to make, if you see someone who needs help and you can do it, do the help. Always offer the help.
Yeah. Yeah. I was this a couple of years ago, probably about 3 years ago now. We were at a convenience store and we were leaving and there's this old woman. She had a cane and she was trying to carry her things that she'd purchased. It was kind of like grocery bags, the plastic grocery type bags. Um, I didn't prompt him at all. My son just ran over there and said, "Here, let me help you with that," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Wow,
It's a decent kid.
yeah, like that's cool, man. Good for you."
I love having my kids get older because they're more reaching the age where I see the initiatives that they're taking and they do take initiatives like that. And then you just sit there and you're like, I'm so glad that this is what you thought to do in this moment because that's how I think a decent or good person should react to that moment.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, how we end every episode is we ask every guest a series of 5 questions. So they're all pretty fun. The first question is, did you have any backup names for your son? Like any names that you almost named him?
Yes, actually, there's a little story that goes with this.
Yes, please do. Please tell.
He was going to be named Max, and on the birthing room on the whiteboard, it had his name as Max, and it had the mother's name and father's name and everything. And my father was there, and he, after Christopher was born, he came in with some flowers for Christopher's mother and everything. And on the card, it said, "Congratulations," and it named his mother and me. And then it said, "Christopher," and put a question mark. And he spelled it
Yeah.
KRISTFFER because I'm Jeff, and the K was a blend of her name and my name.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're like, Christopher it is.
That's a bold move for how to get you to change the name after the baby's born on a card to be like, still accepting offers?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Next question. Do you have a favorite movie or TV dad?
More than, I'm going to tweak this a little bit.
Yeah, tweak it. You're good.
Rather than a TV show or something, because I don't watch that much TV.
Okay.
I would say, and you're going to, Luther Vandross, the song
Yes.
about, dancing with my father.
Yeah.
And that my dad's passed now and everything.
Mhm.
And that gets me every time I hear it.
Okay.
And that just, it captures, I had a stay-at-home mom, and there's a line in there, talks about, you're arguing with your mother and you're waiting for dad to come home and you share to dad how bad mom's being to you, but then he supports mom, but then he carries you off to bed.
Yeah.
And it just relates to me. So I hear my dad through that song.
That's cool.
Luther Vandross. So that's how I'll answer that question, although it's not specific to what was asked.
Good. You're good. I'm a very big believer of one way that grief represents itself is you find the little ways to keep the memories of the ones you love alive. And I think music and art is normally the way or cooking is normally the way in which we keep the memories of those who have left us alive the most.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, next question. Do you have a go-to replacement curse word? Like whenever you want to curse, but you probably shouldn't curse in front of your son. Do you have a go-to word that you say?
Bugger.
Bugger? How did you come up with that? I've never heard that one before. Tell me how you came up with that one.
I went over in London and over in England. I heard
Yeah.
say it, bugger.
Bugger. Oh, bugger. That's awesome.
On it,
Yeah. It's the British doggone it. That's awesome. Okay. Next question. Do you have a favorite kids' toy or activity that you like to do with your son?
Uno.
Uno? Ooh. It can get really fierce. How do you not let that get fierce?
I just accept the fact that he's going to beat me every time. And I would swear that he's cheating, but I can't figure out how he is if he is cheating. But he wins. I would say he wins over 80% of the time.
Does he have you checked his pockets, see if he's got like a bunch of +4s wild cards in his pockets before the game starts?
Yeah, you would think, but I'm like, yeah, he's good. He's
That's
good.
awesome. My kids are now starting to get to the age where, like, if I play checkers, they can actually beat me without me letting them win. And I'm like, this is a different dynamic to this relationship.
Yeah.
And last question, is there a moment of your son's life that you're most looking forward to?
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to say that every stage of my son's life, and he even asks me,
Yeah.
hey, Dad, what was your favorite part of me? Christopher, every phase is different, but they're all equally as rewarding, and I've loved it all. I guess when he has his first child,
Yeah.
I become a grandparent, I suppose. But I also think because we are extremely close because we have a unique situation where it's just the two of us. He doesn't have contact with his mother at all. So I've been mom, I've been dad, I've been his best friend. We're very close.
Yeah.
And I often wonder when that day comes that I die.
Yeah.
Who knows what those circumstances may be, but just knowing when I pass that I'm sure I'm going to be unbelievably proud of the man he's become. So not that I look forward to dying, but
No.
I do look forward to the peace, I suppose, of knowing that I did a great job and he's going to carry on the legacy that my parents and my grandparents and how they influenced who I became. I just hope that I had influenced him the same. So it's kind of an interesting answer to that question to add it on. But I think that's I don't know, having that sense of feeling when you pass over the other side, I think is something that's quite rewarding.
Yeah. I would think so. I would hope that it's a silly thing to hope for because it's not a guarantee that whenever you come to the end of your life, that your kids are decent, do uphold good values, and are good to the people around them. Because it's not always a guarantee that that's how a child turns out, no matter what you do. So it feels silly to communicate like, man, I saw my kid's a decent person. It's like, well, of course you do. And it's like, no, it's really easy to not be a decent person. So I hope they're a decent person.
Right.
So only last thing I have for you is just moment for self-promotion. So like, I know you already said the website for the new book and everything, but if we want to find you, follow you, what all you got going on, all that stuff.
Well, listen, there's a lot of ways to reach me. You can go to my website. It's jeffwenninger.com. Like I said, you can go if you're interested in the book, you can go to onthinicebook.com. I also, Jeff Wenninger, I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can send me messages. I will respond. I do a lot of writing. I post a lot of articles. I do a lot of media. I'm
Yeah.
actually going to be on News Nation tonight at 9:50.
Cool.
So talking about law enforcement stuff, specifically in this interview will be the riots that are occurring right now out in Los Angeles. But yeah, if people are interested and I have my opinions, but I realize a lot of people don't always agree with them. But I'm always willing to engage in some productive conversation. So
Nice.
yeah,
Well, if you're, I don't know when are you going to do a book tour for the book once you release it?
yeah. It's I'm going to be doing quite a bit of it'll be all over the country, and I'm going to
Yeah.
be speaking quite a bit at universities.
Cool.
So there's there's going to be I'm going to be very busy.
Yes. And it sounds like a lot of that is still to be determined of like, all right, when's the book actually get released? All right, who created the schedule for where I'm at in the country this week? And then just probably go to your website to know where you are and at what times.
Yeah, and the book will be on every platform. You'll find it at Barnes and Noble and Amazon or what have you. And it's coming out. It's going to be hardback
Yeah.
and softback as well as Kindle.
Cool.
And actually, in about 4 months or so, I'm going to be reading it.
Yeah, good.
It's going to actually be my voice.
That's cool. If you give me an audiobook, I will finish it probably in a week. But if you give me an actual book to read, it takes me like 2 to 3 months to get through it. Yeah, Jeff, that's pretty much all I got for you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing a little about your life. And yeah, we're excited to read the book, excited to learn more about it once it comes out and all that good stuff.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Thanks, Jeff. We'll see you next time. Okay.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the episode.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Imperfect Dads Podcast.
And make sure to subscribe and rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to us.
The music is provided by the Wildfeathers.
And all episodes are produced and edited by me.
Make sure to tune in Mondays for new episodes.